NanZhuangTou. Welcome to what may be humanity's first failed utopia. Welcome, friends. I am Ancient Swan, and today we be traveling back in time more than 10,000 years to around 8,500 BCE, metaphorically, of course, not literally. My wife says I'm not allowed to invent a time machine. I think she's afraid I'll use it to go back to a time before I met her. And she's right, I would. Anyway, here we are, approximately 8,500 BC, a simpler time, a purer time, a time when the only thing more fragile than your pottery was your will to live. Dating to around 10,500 years ago, NanZhuangTou is a Stone Age site and one of mankind's earliest known settlements, as well as the earliest known Stone Age site in all of China. Now archaeologists call this a Neolithic settlement. I call it humanity's first group project. And like all group projects, it was doomed from the start. Imagine it, thousands and thousands of years ago, a dozen proto-humans squatting in the mud, arguing over whether to invent agriculture or just eat the neighbor's dog. Spoiler alert, they did both. NanZhuangTou is also the site of the earliest known ceramics in northern China. You know what that means? It means someone spent 3 days shaping a bowl with their bare hands, fired it in a pit of smouldering twigs, and proudly presented it to the tribe, and I think we should all be grateful for that. Otherwise, we'd still be drinking soup with our hands to this day. This was still early days pottery, though, when designs and art were still a future thought to be had by someone else. There were no designs here, just lumps with ambition. Every pot looked like it was made by a blindfolded raccoon having a panic attack, but they kept making them, because that's what humans do. We fail repeatedly, but then we get back up again, dust ourselves off, make a new, slightly better version, and call it culture. Now, the people of NanZhuangTou weren't just potters. No, they were pioneers. They were the first to say, what if we stopped wandering the earth in search of food and instead just stayed in one place and slowly starved together? And thus, agriculture was born. They planted millet, not because it was delicious, but because it was the only thing that didn't immediately die in the cursed soil they chose to settle on. And when the crops failed, and they failed often, they turned to their pigs. Yes, you did hear me correctly. NanZhuangTou shows evidence of some of mankind's very first domesticated pigs, which is to say, one of our ancestors long, long ago looked at a wild boar and thought, you know what would make a great roommate, that tusked death machine over there? And so they cornered some wild boar, ushered them through the front door into their living rooms, and bred them until they were just angry bacon with legs. And I would like to be one of the first to thank these people for their efforts. Not only did they go out to capture one of the most dangerous animals, but they were successful and they were persistent. And every single bacon sandwich I've had since I was born is nothing but pure 100% homage to these people and their efforts. God bless. Imagine being one of the first humans in the universe to stare into the eyes of a snarling, mud-caked pig and whisper, "You are my future!" That's not farming, that's a hostage situation. And I could not be thankful enough if I tried. But it doesn't end there. After getting bored by their local boars, the locals turned their attention to the local wolves instead. NanZhuangTou also shows one of mankind's first pieces of evidence for dogs. Not the fluffy kind, though. These were skeletal, twitchy beasts that lived on bone scraps and existential dread. They didn't bark. They just stared into the fire, remembering the forest. But the real tragedy of NanZhuangTou wasn't the hunger or the lice or the constant threat of being gored by your own livestock. No, it was the hope. These people believed they were building something, a community, a future, a place where their children could grow up and invent slightly better pottery. And for a while they were right. Multiple generations of people lived here and did exactly that. For more than 1,000 years, this place was the site of mankind's first steps in the right direction of civilization, each generation improving ever so slightly on the works of the one before them. But they didn't only invent progress, they also invented bureaucracy. You think it started in Mesopotamia? Nope. It started here, when someone said, "Hey, who's in charge of the grain storage?" And suddenly there were meetings and minutes and a guy named Thog who wore a feather and called himself Chief Logistics Officer. And as with every great society, there eventually comes a time when they get round to inventing great gods. And gods need rituals, otherwise how are they supposed to know you are afraid of them? Or how else are you going to have something to blame? Oh yes, when the crops failed and the pigs escaped and the dogs unionized, they turned to the gods. They carved little idols, they danced in circles, they sacrificed everything around them, including each other, as you do. But the gods didn't answer, because the gods were busy, or non-existent, or laughing. Many dozens of early Stone Age tools have also been found here. Stone grinders, rollers, bone awls, and the occasional mystery object that nobody understands and nobody can identify, leading every archaeologist to insist it must be ritualistic. Because when archaeologists are in doubt, there's no quicker way out of that doubt than to slap a ritual label on it. This oddly shaped rock, clearly this is a fertility symbol. No, Karen, that's just a potato masher. Your buddy, Ancient Dave, was just trying to make a broth. What I'm personally fascinated by about this time in history is that this was a time of change and upheaval. These folks were transitioning from hunter-gatherers to early farmers, which means they voluntarily gave up chasing deer for the thrill of weeding millet. It might sound like a difficult pitch, but ultimately it worked, because the biggest selling point will always be the fact that they didn't have to keep moving around so much, which is generally a bit easier. And if there's one thing that's eternal about humans, it's how much we all just prefer to move a bit less and get paid the same, if at all possible. I myself have took more than one step in my life that involves moving less for the same amount of, if not more, money. And I doubt I'm the first. Eventually, the settlement was abandoned. The people scattered. The pigs went feral. The dogs became wolves again. And the pottery, it remained, buried in the dirt, waiting for some poor archaeologist 10,000 years later to dig it up and say, ah yes, ritual use. So what is NanZhuangTou, really? A birthplace of civilization, a milestone in human development? Well, yes, it's both, but also, no, it's a warning, a cautionary tale. A reminder that the first time we tried to settle down and build a society, we ended up cold, hungry, and arguing over who peed in the millet. And yet, we kept going. We built cities, we wrote laws, we invented TikTok, all because a few muddy lunatics decided to make a pot and call it progress. And they were 100% correct. It was progress. Every little helps, and even the grandest of mankind's inventions have to start somewhere. These people formed one of history's very first communities. They lived together, worked together, probably argued over noisy neighbors and troublesome little brats disrespecting their elders, and yet they made it work. They laid the groundwork literally for everything that came after. Agriculture, pottery, domestic animals, pets, passive-aggressive neighbor feuds. All of it began here thanks to the brave, forward-thinking souls of NanZhuangTou. NanZhuangTou may be a relatively small and little-known site for most humans today, but truth is that this is where much of us began, especially if you happen to be Chinese. These people existed thousands of years before the word China was even a thought in someone's mind. These people were the initial pioneers, the first to dream, the first to fail, and the first to realize that civilization is just a long, slow descent into paperwork and regret. If only they'd warned the rest of us. NanZhuangTou was eventually abandoned for unknown reasons at some point around 8,500 BC, although clues can be found in how and where it was preserved. NanZhuangTou was discovered in 1986, nearby the shores of Lake Bayang, under 180 centimeters of mud and peat, indicating that the site may have flooded. And as with all things that get too wet, the people often move somewhere a bit drier. Fortunately, though, this peat did a fantastic job in preserving what we can see today. The very beginnings of life as we know it. And the lesson is almost over, boys and girls, and with all good lessons, it is important to recap what we have learned today. As always, I have literally no idea what you have learned, or if you are even paying attention. So let's instead just recap what I have learned. I've learned that mankind's urge to be sedentary is even older than I first believed. I mean, I knew it was old, but not this old, and I'm impressed. I've also learned, although I guess I kind of always knew, but there had to be that first domesticated pig, right? There's always a first. Imagine looking at a wild boar and thinking, yes, let's bring that into the house. Early domestication meant that these animals were still half feral, and it would take many, many years before they became half pet. In the meantime, they were all 100% chaos. Imagine being the husbands in those households for the first few dozen decades, trying to console the wife as yet another favorite dress gets covered in shit. It's okay, dear. It'll calm down any time soon. I hope. Or even worse, imagine being the woman who's married to a man who just brought a wild boar through the doorway and tried to convince you it'll all be fine in the end. That must have been real, genuine, true love. And how about the dogs? Or, as is more likely, wolves? Yes, dear, don't worry. It definitely won't eat the children. Fingers crossed. I've also learned that perseverance is eternal, and that despite how many times we mess up, us humans just keep on going. It may be our most redeeming characteristic. Keep planting, keep building, keep shaping clay, because that first pot was rubbish, but it was a neat idea and might work eventually. I quite honestly have far, far more admiration for these people than my humour and passive-aggressive sarcasm might have you believe. I'm envious in a way I myself may never fully comprehend. Not of their life, not really. Their life was hard, as tough as could be, and I'm much more content with my air conditioning and Pornhub, but I am envious because that life made them hard. Whilst I, in comparison, am quickly becoming a fat jelly mould, shaped by years of sitting on an office chair, doing nothing but continuously drinking full-fat cola and shoving gummy bears into my mouth hole. There's a part of me wishes I could be as hard as these people, and I know I may never be. Still though, I bought a new 85-inch TV yesterday, so I'll take my losses and just get on with it. Now then, before we continue, allow me a second to kindly ask your fingers to like and subscribe. As one of my favourite other History Online peeps, Mini-Minute Man Milo Rossi often says, it's like tipping the bellhop on your way out. If you've learned anything or had fun here today, leave a like and subscribe to help me out a bit. God knows I need it. Now, as always, much of the footage you've been watching in this video is from a wee map I went and made. This one for the game, Cities Skylines 2, because I have found a way to combine my love of history with my love of world building, with my love of city building games, with my love of keeping myself busy so that the wife doesn't think I'm doing nothing, and then go out of her way to find me something to do, like fix the fence. If you are at all interested in building your city on this map too, then you can find it for free by following the link in the description below. And if you'd like to know this map's information before you do that, then you are in luck, because by sheer coincidence, that's what I was about to tell you anyway. Climate 5 to 28 degrees Celsius, buildable area 90%, outside connections, roads, rail, sea, air, power. Natural resources, fertile land 115 square kilometres, forest 60 kilotons, ore 76 kilotons, oil 112 kilotons, fish 34 kilotons. Terrain, flatter than the flattest flat thing you've ever flatteringly flattened. And that's it, folks. That's it for another attempt at being funny whilst pimping out my map in the shape of a history video. I hope you enjoyed it. Keep your eyes peeled, because I'll be back within the week with something else to watch. Quick shout out also to the people who are generous enough to have joined my Patreon, my favourite folks, whose parents went ahead and named them DD, Anthony T, George H, Stephen and Malichi I. Thank you, folks, and thank you all. And remember, if your dog starts staring into the fire, move. Peace, love, and NanZhuangTou. Goodbye.